When you hear the phrase grooming gangs, it probably sounds to you like a group of overly aggressive barbers, but unfortunately, it's much, much worse. Grooming gangs are networks of predators consisting primarily of Pakistani Muslim men systematically sexually preying using manipulation and abuse.
They raped me first, and then they said to me, stop speaking to the police, don't speak to the police, why are you doing that?
That room, that flat, took my childhood from me. I think I was raped by around 150 men over the 3-year period.
He would rape me once a week, every week. And then that's when he started to gain control over me.
There were migrant rape gangs in England.
Since the new year, Musk has raked up an old scandal over grooming gangs, put out more than 50 posts on X on child sex abuse cases in the UK.
Unfortunately, this is not a one-off incident either. We're talking cities like Rotherham, Rochdale, Telford, Oxford, Newcastle, and at least 50 cities where grooming gangs have preyed upon young girls. The only thing spreading faster than the grooming gangs themselves are the cover-ups of their crimes. Because here's the kicker. The crimes are well documented. The victims are helpless. The authorities about as responsive as a government helpline. Because in the UK, apparently they don't care about how many children must have their lives destroyed, but by God, they will never, ever be called Islamophobic. Now recently the issue has become enormous because the world's richest man and the owner of Twitter, the man who played the key part in getting Donald Trump re-elected, Elon Musk, has picked up the issue and has been running with it. Elon blasted the current UK leadership like they were a Tesla whistleblower, and he called out the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer and MP Jess Phillips for turning a blind eye while thousands of young girls were exploited. So today let's talk about the slow and steady downfall of the erstwhile greatest power in the world, the UK, and how cultural relativism, fear of Islamophobia, and the leftist-Islamist nexus created one of the most horrific scandals in UK history. This is the true and heartbreaking story of the UK grooming gangs. So the crimes of the UK grooming gangs is one of the most horrifying, gut-wrenching, and disturbingly under-discussed issue that for some reason in the UK has gotten swept under the rug faster than the presence of a member of the British royal family at Epstein Island.
UK's rape gangs involving Pakistani men are back in the news.
Conviction of 9 men for being part of a child exploitation ring who used young girls for sex.
1 million white English children may have been the victims of Muslim rape gangs.
So what exactly are these grooming gangs? Grooming is when predators target vulnerable people, in this case young girls, and sexually exploit them. The victims here are from working class backgrounds, often from broken homes and understate care. You know, the ones that society was supposed to protect. In every instance, the abusers prey on their vulnerabilities, they desensitize the victim to sexual behavior and aim to break down their resistance. This in turn makes the victim less likely to recognize the abuse and even less likely to report it. The gangs break down the victim's resistance, isolate them from their support systems and their families, and this was not being done by individuals. A lot of these crimes are done by organized gangs consisting primarily of Muslims of Pakistani descent, and these gangs have been operating in allegedly over 50 cities in the UK, including Huddersfield, Rotherham, Rochdale, Oxford, Bristol, Peterborough, and Newcastle. You name the city, they've got a grooming gang scandal. There are probably as many grooming gangs in the UK right now as football clubs at this point. At this rate, in a few years, people can probably have local grooming gang rivalries like football rivalries, and even have Twitter fights about which city's grooming gang is the nastiest. In September 2012, an article in the Times revealed that a 2010 police report had warned of widespread sexual crimes being committed against children in southern Yorkshire by networks of Muslim men. Now, the police didn't do much about it, but the article prompted an independent inquiry led by Professor Alexis J. She reported that at least 1,400 children were subjected to sexual exploitation in Rotherham between 1997 and 2013. In the inquiry report, published in 2014, Professor Alexis J. went into the details about how girls as young as 11 were assaulted, trafficked, abducted, beaten, and intimidated by men predominantly of Pakistani heritage. According to a 2017 report by anti-extremism think tank Quilliam Foundation, 85% of the grooming gang offenders were Pakistani Muslim men. Similar scandals were also reported in towns like Oldham, Oxford, Rochdale, and Telford, which led to a national investigation in the child sexual abuse cases. An investigation by the Newcastle Police, codenamed Operation Sanctuary, was then launched in 2013, and it revealed that more than 700 girls were reportedly enslaved and abused for years. Minor girls were taken to parties and laden with drugs like cocaine, cannabis, alcohol, or mephedrone before being assaulted and abused. The Oldham grooming gang case refers to a series of child abuse cases in Oldham in Greater Manchester, England, involving the grooming and exploitation of young girls by mostly Pakistani men. And look at how horribly these poor girls are being intimidated so that they don't report these actions to the police. The Telegraph, quoting Professor Jay's report, said the children were doused in petrol and threatened with guns that if they reported this to anyone, they would be set on fire or murdered. Following this report, police carried out Operation Span in 2012 in Oldham, where 9 perpetrators were convicted, of which 8 were British Pakistani men. Since then, there have been more operations and more convictions, but for a lot of young girls and their families, this is too little, too late. And here's the most shocking part of this entire ordeal: the complicity of the media, politicians, and the authorities in ignoring or actively covering up these crimes for fear of being called Islamophobic or offending a particular vote bank. And to the Indians, this is going to sound eerily familiar. The Indians right now looking at the British people being like, first time? So look at this. In 2006, a 12-year-old girl named Sophie reported being molested but was dismissed by the police. Later, she was assaulted multiple times again after being abducted. Several of these victims have tragically lost their lives. For instance, Victoria Agoglia, aged 15, was given a fatal dose of heroin after being drugged and assaulted. Charlene Downs, aged 14, disappeared in Blackpool and her body has never been found. Lucy Lowe was groomed at the age of 12 by Azhar Ali Mahmood. She was impregnated at 14 and ultimately murdered along with a family. Most victims are young girls aged 11 to 15, often manipulated through these coercion and threats. In 2024, an independent review commissioned by Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham found widespread organized sexual exploitation of children within Rochdale from 2004 to 2012. It highlighted that people who were in charge at the Rochdale Council during the period 2004 to 2013 did not recognize nor acknowledge the very serious failures and accusations that affected the lives of these children. Fearing accusations of racism due to the ethnic backgrounds of many of these perpetrators, law enforcement has been hesitant to act decisively.
The authorities were not forthcoming about reporting it was because many of those who could have were afraid of being called racists.
In the horrific Rotherham case, where over 1,400 children were abused between 1997 and 2013 by predominantly British Pakistani men, Professor Alexis Jay's report revealed that the council staff and others knew of the abuse but turned a blind eye to what was happening and refused to identify the perpetrators, in part for fear of being branded racist and Islamophobic. Despite these shocking revelations, very little has changed since 2014. The UK government has been criticized for failing to implement strict measures to combat these grooming gangs.
Grooming gangs. It all began with a demand from the city of Oldham. Officials there noticed a worrying trend, a rise in reports of grooming and abuse of teenage girls. So the city asked for a public inquiry, a full-fledged probe by the UK Home Office. But the Security Minister has rejected it. Her name is Jess Phillips.
Many believe that political correctness has hindered effective action against these gangs, allowing them to operate with relative impunity. Even those who tried to sound the alarm were silenced. Whistleblowers faced dismissal, community pressure, and outright threats. Instead of tackling the criminals, authorities allegedly decided to tackle the messengers and the whistleblowers. In November last year, Professor Jay said that she felt frustrated that none of her report's 20 recommendations has been acknowledged or implemented more than 2 years after its conclusion. Many victims feel isolated and unsupported, making it difficult for them to come forward. And listen, I don't want to talk much about karma here, but think about what the British were thinking in 1947. Hey, let's create an Islamic country right next to India just to fuck with them. What's the worst that could happen? So the question remains, how long will it take for the UK to learn its lesson? And this was the grim reality for countless victims of these grooming gangs in the UK. Authorities continued to look the other way. Between 1997 and 2013 in Rotherham, over 260 victims were referred to social care services. And guess what? The referrals were never acted upon. In 2017, the Andy Burnham report uncovered that 96 individuals who posed a serious risk to the children in the Greater Manchester area were identified, but not a single arrest was made. Listen to abuse survivor Samantha Smith detail the atrocities that occurred.
Things have gotten better, sentencing has gotten better. If sentencing was better, then a convicted Pakistani Muslim rape gang member wouldn't be allowed to see his child and be released early from prison.
Apparently, police didn't register proper complaints against Muslim grooming gangs, and victims were finally forced to address the issues on social media because the police simply refused to investigate their complaints.
In October of 2023, I was raped, and I reported the rape the night I put in a series of complaints to the police due to a series of what I believe were letdowns and inappropriate and unprofessional behaviour. I've just received a response to that complaint, and we need to talk.
69% of serious sexual abuse victims withdrew from investigations in recent years due to court delays, low conviction rates, and fears of reliving the trauma in court. Patrick James O'Flynn is an English journalist and Social Democratic Party politician, evidently a left-leaning individual who served as member of the European Parliament from the east of England from 2014 to 2019. They also admit that the issue of Muslim immigration is one of the main causes for the assault against British women. 2 in 5 victims were dissatisfied with police response, and 73% of the women lacked confidence that reporting a crime would actually lead to justice. Because according to them, instead of taking serious action, in some cases the police start blaming the victims only. They start asking questions like, where were you, what were you doing, what were you wearing? My goodness, I never thought I would see the day where the UK police is making Bihar police look good by comparison. And not only were the victims left without justice by the authorities, they were also abandoned by their government. In 2008, the UK Home Office advised police to not prosecute grooming gang cases. The reason? Fear of damaging community relations. And unfortunately for the government, it wasn't just a left versus right issue. In 2019, the then Conservative Prime Minister Boris Johnson made headlines for calling money spent on investigating historic child abuse crimes spaffing on a wall. Spaffing is English slang for ejaculation.
I think an awful lot of money, an awful lot of police time now goes into these historic offences and all this malarkey, and 60 million pounds I saw was being spaffed up the wall on some investigation into historic child abuse.
I wonder if he talks about all government spending like this. Military spending is simply busting a nut on the carpet. Social spending is simply splooging in the sink. And don't talk to me about catching the perpetrators of these grooming gangs, because that, my friend, is simply jizzing on the bedsheet. Not stopping here, in 2020, Johnson's Home Office suppressed its own research on grooming gangs. When questioned, they claimed releasing it was not in the national interest. Funny, because I thought protecting children was actually what was in the national interest. Meanwhile, Labour is also no better. MP Jess Phillips refused requests from the Oldham City Council for a government-led inquiry into the institutional failures that allowed these crimes to happen, because apparently investigating these things was just simply too much paperwork.
After refusing to hold a public inquiry into historic sexual abuse by grooming gangs in Oldham.
Yes, this decision has been made, a letter that was written by Jess Phillips, the safeguarding minister, and Elon Musk has attacked this decision as disgraceful. Kemi Badenoch has also said that a full national inquiry into rape gangs is long overdue.
Imagine if America had said this to Britain when Britain was getting pounded by the Germans in the Second World War. Listen, I would love to come and get involved and save your ass, but man, look at how many forms there are to fill. And I have to go play golf with my friends in about an hour. In 2012, Keir Starmer, then head of the Crown Prosecution Service and current Prime Minister of the UK, admitted that the justice system was flawed in handling these sexual exploitation cases. But here's the kicker, nothing has changed since then.
How many victims of abuse do you think you've failed? That's an impossible question to answer.
Both police and social services have apologised for their role in this. What about the law? Do you have an apology to make?
Well, I don't think, from a prosecutorial point of view, it's about apologies.
ITV News challenged Keir Starmer, who was Director of Public Prosecutions at the time Warboys was sentenced.
I think these decisions were 9 years ago. It's very important that you go to the Crown Prosecution Service and get an accurate readout of the decisions that were made, particularly if further allegations are likely to be made now. Thank you very much indeed.
And this isn't just about the crimes, it's about the system that enabled them. Look at the media's role. Despite a vast body of evidence that shows that these grooming gangs are overwhelmingly comprised of Pakistani Muslim men, the media has played a significant role in obfuscating the issue. And let's be honest, in doing their best to defend the perpetrators. They've routinely referred to these Pakistani Muslim gangs as Asian gangs or South Asian gangs.
Now, the Indian community in the UK feels that this phrase unfairly indicates that all Asians in crimes committed primarily by individuals of Pakistani descent.
How the hell are these Asian gangs? Are the Koreans doing this? Are the Laotians doing this? Are the Cambodians doing this? How many Bhutanese Buddhists are in these gangs? Yes, technically, the Pakistanis are Asians, but you're deliberately calling them Asian instead of Pakistani just to hide the fact that this is a specifically Pakistani Muslim problem. Just because there are some PDF files in Europe, you know what I mean. It doesn't mean that all of Europe is a PDF file continent. Or just because a naked mole rat is ugly as all hell, you can't just say that all mammals are ugly. Dogs are cute, cats are cute, cows are cute. This is simply a naked mole rat problem. This is a very common trope in Western media and among some idiotic Indians as well. They're specifically using the word Asian and South Asian to take the burden of responsibility away from Pakistani Muslims and for them to not be called Islamophobic. This is like saying, listen, I know millions of Jews died, but I don't want to say anything about it because I don't want to come across as Germanophobic. I am nothing if not culturally sensitive. Remember that incredible documentary made against the sexual assault case in India called India's Daughter, as well as the 75 million articles written about how unsafe India is for women? I wonder if the BBC diverted even 2% of the time and resources that they spent on India towards those little girls in Britain. Maybe they could have had justice just a little bit sooner. Unfortunately, the BBC apparently still believes that Britain is a world-spanning empire and the UK is a shining light while the other colonies are a festering mess. And I hate to remind the BBC, but the sun has well and truly set on the British Empire. Britain is returning to be a footnote in world politics, and this is a prime example of it. Your focus on shaming Indians thousands of miles away while thousands of young British girls have been sexually abused. It's like your own house is on fire, but you're looking across the road at the neighbor's house and laughing that their bedroom fan is broken.
This is fine. I'm okay with the events that are unfolding currently. That's okay. Things are gonna be okay.
And here's the irony of all ironies. You see often white supremacists and myriad racists praise the exploitative British Empire for coming to India and actually helping India by ending evil practices like sati, which was already documented to be an extremely rare occurrence in the country, not like witch burnings in Europe, which were as common as drunk uncles at Indian weddings who start getting overly friendly with girls half their age. The irony is that Suella Braverman, a conservative MP of Indian origin and the then Home Secretary, was the person to suggest in a column in the Daily Mail in 2023 that almost all of the people involved in the grooming gangs are Muslim Pakistani men. She has been the one that has been talking consistently about investigating these grooming gangs and catching and punishing the people responsible, despite getting insane pushback from media and her own fellow politicians. She brought this issue into the national spotlight. Ironically, it was the then Indian origin Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, who instituted an inquiry into these grooming gangs, which is what led to this issue being taken more seriously politically and socially today.
Several independent inquiries have now confirmed that over the last few decades, thousands of young girls in towns and cities across Britain were sexually abused and assaulted by grooming gangs. Now, last summer, I promised I would do whatever it takes to stop these crimes. That is why we're announcing the most robust response to this issue any government ever has. We are today launching the Grooming Gangs Task Force, a group of specialist police officers who will disrupt grooming gangs wherever they may be and bring perpetrators to justice. To ensure victims are never ignored again, we're strengthening a national hotline for whistleblowers, and we'll be creating a legal duty on local officials to report these crimes. We've made it mandatory for the ethnicity data of suspects to be collected, and we will be ensuring the perpetrators of these crimes receive the most severe punishments. We will do whatever it takes to root out this evil once and for all.
British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak on Monday, 3rd April, condemned the political correctness which has prevented action against vile criminals behind the sexual abuse of children and young women, as he unveiled plans for a new task force to go after such gangs.
But nothing is more important than the protection of our children, and I know that all of you here today are absolutely committed to stamping out grooming gangs and this sickening abuse of young people. Now, it is an absolutely horrific...
So to our top story this morning, the government will announce a new police task force today to tackle grooming gangs as part of a set of new measures designed to protect women and girls.
Well, the plan will also include tougher sentences for members of grooming gangs, with the Prime Minister pledging not to let political correctness get in the way of the crackdown.
He instituted a task force, which was a crack team of data analysts and elite officers working alongside 43 police forces across England and Wales, funded by the Home Office and the National Crime Agency. Their mission was to hold these criminals actually accountable. And in just a year after Rishi Sunak instituted this task force, over 550 suspects were arrested, 4,000 victims identified and protected.
Now, a dedicated police task force set up to bring down grooming gangs has supported police forces in England and Wales to make hundreds of arrests in its first year.
In the last 12 months, the crack team of expert investigators and analysts have helped police forces arrest over 550 suspects, identify and protect over 4,000 victims.
Within the laws created by Rishi Sunak, professionals working with children, teachers, social workers, police can now face criminal sanctions if they fail to report signs of abuse like they did before. So to the British, I would like to say, consider the debt settled. The Indians are here to stop your child molestation traditions. It has no place in the 21st century. So, you're welcome. And that brings us to today. With Elon Musk and J.K. Rowling both have weighed in. Elon Musk accuses Starmer of complicity in what he describes as the molestation of thousands of English girls, asserting that Starmer, as head of the Crown Prosecution Services from 2008 to 2013, neglected to take decisive action against these grooming gangs. He also called Labour MP Jess Phillips an apologist for these grooming gangs. He further contended that Phillips should be imprisoned for rejecting calls for a national inquiry into these crimes. Meanwhile, J.K. Rowling, yes, of Harry Potter fame, argued that the term grooming gangs was too soft, saying is like calling people who stab you to death knife enthusiasts. The new Conservative Party leader, Kemi Badenoch, called for a national inquiry into the UK's grooming gang scandal, saying that 2025 must be the year that the victims start to get justice. People have finally had enough. They've taken to the streets to address the issue. And the interesting thing is that in January 2024, when such a protest was taken out, that protest was opposed, rather disturbed, by who else but the pro-Palestine supporters.
The groups of left-wing activists, as you can see with the pro-Palestinian flags, who have come out to oppose the screening of the film that talks about an Asian woman who was gang raped.
It's so incredible to me because the pro-Palestine supporters are the funniest bunch in the world because they have the most slam dunk cause right now. After October 7th, when Israel launched a military operation into Gaza, the whole world was basically on their side. But they just can't help themselves. They have to shoot themselves in the foot. They have to show their real face. They have to go disrupt Christmas gatherings. They have to go disrupt funerals. They have to go disrupt people at the mall just minding their own damn business. They have to go disrupt a protest for a woman that has been assaulted. What a way to turn people against you, despite having so many advantages. It's like having Cristiano Ronaldo's skills, but having Jermaine Pennant's career. Who is Jermaine Pennant, you ask? Exactly. Incredibly, still, despite all this uproar, this situation is not being taken seriously by the UK Prime Minister's office. Instead, Keir Starmer attacks those people who are questioning the government, accusing them of spreading lies. The leader of Reform UK, Nigel Farage, has publicly urged Starmer to initiate a full inquiry into the ongoing cases of grooming gangs and child exploitation. He emphasized that if the government does not act, his party will take independent measures to investigate these scandals further. Hopefully, the intense public scrutiny forces the UK government into action, and the thousands of girls that have been let down by their government, by their media, and by their authorities get some semblance of justice. The UK currently is going through P. Diddy levels of downfall in the last few years, with their massive economic downturn, massive fall in global standing, collapse of their social services, and this ordeal is another piece of shit on the third sandwich that is currently the UK. But I want to ask you, what does it say about British media right now, Western media in general, where they have ignored this horrible ordeal happening to their own people for so many years while focusing so minutely on any little controversy that ever happened in India? What does it say about them in your opinion? Let me know your thoughts and comments in the comment section down below. And if you're enjoying these English videos, let me know what I should do the next English video on. I will see you for the next episode, and until then, stay happy, stay healthy. I will see you next time, and to all of you, a secular pranam.